Right, hey guys, how are we doing? Back under the video from Totally Not Mark, continuing with his Bleach review. It's an hour and 20 minutes long, so let's see how we go with this one. This is the Arrancar arc. I think he wanted to split this into two, but he decided to do the whole long video, which is cool. The Arrancar arc, again, anime only, up to 1,000 Year Blood War arc. I liked the Arrancar arc. I didn't think this was as good as Soul Society. Yeah, plus it must be weird. I say it must be. I would find it weird now reading the manga and not having the Bount Arc in between. Because at the time I didn't realise, that was filler. So yeah, he's been lucky doing it this way because my god, the Bount Arc is terrible. But yeah, the Arrancar arc is brilliant, but in my personal opinion, anime only perspective, I didn't like it as much as the Soul Society arc. But there are some epic moments. Rukia, Grimmjow, everything going on with Aizen and that. Absolutely sick. Let's see.
Okay, so I was initially cautious but optimistic about what awaited me past the
Rukia is so sick.
So far, it's better than anything that I've come across in this story.
Oh wow, okay.
Soul Society or otherwise. It's got wacky characters.
Yeah, the hollows and that, and the whatever those guys are called, training.
Back into the fray, and it has some
he is right as well. It does make sense why they come back.
So far. It's just really fun, and I can't believe where I am with this series now. 240 chapters in, and I genuinely think Bleach is awesome.
It's amazing.
So, it begs the question, what the hell is up with the differences between the anime adaptation and the original manga?
Oh, okay.
10 years ago, my first experience with Bleach took place, and it really didn't connect with me then. I found characters annoying, and for one reason or another, just ended up dropping the series entirely. However, now, after having read the manga, characters like Orihime, Kon, and, as I'm realizing more and more through this arc, Ichigo's father, are all far more complicated, compelling, and likable than the anime itself led me to believe.
Oh, that's interesting.
Personally strange because this seems to be something that splits the fandom of Bleach as a whole, pun not intended. In other words, there are those that agree with this positive manga sentiment 100%, and there are those that don't seem to be bothered by these differences and love what the anime uniquely offers.
Fair.
I'm not suggesting either are wrong here, but I guess it goes to show how massive the difference in experience can be between two groups with slight preferential differences, making Bleach one of the most pronounced cases of this I've yet come across in my journey. In the anime, I found the father to be kinda creepy and massively irritating, but in the manga,
I did find him annoying,
far less, thus making his random physical intrusions much more novel than annoying, and the same can be said for Kon. However, Orihime was another story. She was a character I pigeonholed as a one-note fan service type character with little to no substance beyond what she offered on the surface for gag humor. However, now after having read the manga, she is unironically my second favorite character in this story, particularly after having read this week's material, with her struggling to reconcile her self-worth and ability as it applies to those she cares about. So, I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you haven't had a good experience watching Bleach's anime, then try out the manga. It worked for me. And if the manga didn't tickle your fancy, then maybe the anime is for you. Because personally, I am just blown away by how different an experience the manga has done.
That is interesting. That's really interesting.
To be let down by this story. Now, I am thrilled to keep reading and to see what more Mr. Kubo has to offer me. And it makes me wonder also if he had any issues with the way the anime handled his characters personally. Anyways, without further ado, let's dive into the first invasion and my thoughts on this arc so far. Okay, so from the outset, we know I loved my read-through of this week's material. However, I went into it feeling a certain level of trepidation. Following the conclusion to the Soul Society, I questioned whether or not Kubo would be able to, in a satisfying fashion, leave enough unanswered to interest and excite me for the next arc to utilize. Certainly, there's the unanswered terror surrounding Aizen and all that he represents as a threat to the story. However, that wouldn't be enough to grip me as a reader personally. We never launched into the Soul Society to bring security and safety to that world or even our own. It was instead all driven by the interpersonal relationships long since established from the beginning of the story. And that was more than enough for me. It's sort of what the heartbeat of Bleach has been, Ichigo's relationships with his friends and allies. Why did we travel into the Soul Society? To protect a dear friend we had justifiably grown attached to over the course of the story. And once we achieved that, there was a wonderful sense of catharsis that flooded forth from the pages, knowing that Ichigo and his pals had traveled to hell and back and succeeded in
not
their
quite
mission
hell,
to
but
set
yeah.
their world free. This is
That's
why
a different
when
movie.
Rukia decided to stay behind, it felt reasonable and final. She had served her purpose in the story, it felt, and so this seemed like the perfect ending for her, and indeed the dynamic that drove the story forward from the beginning. And make no mistake, this is what drove the story, not Aizen, not the looming threat of something dogmatic and terrifying. That's sort of incidental. What gets the readers into the position to enjoy these titanic battles between the likes of Lucci and Luffy, Goku and Frieza, or Naruto and Sasuke, are the friendships that acted as the backbone behind their reasoning being there. Whether
The build
it be
up to it, the
Naruto's
emotional
devotion
build
to
up,
saving
yeah.
a friend from himself, Luffy's promise to grant Robin's wish to live, or the heroes of Earth in Dragon Ball traveling to the void unknown in search of a way to bring their lost comrades back to life. Every single one of these iconic battles manifested first and foremost because of an emotional connection or deeper reasoning beyond wanting to bring justice to a particular group of people we aren't too familiar with. In other words, fighting wasn't enough, and fighting on its own isn't enough for me either. In the same way, Frieza wasn't enough of a reason to bring us to Namek, Aizen isn't enough on his own to bring us back into conflict unless there's an emotional component. So, what did I think of how this arc kicked things off? Well, I really, really liked it. And it
Hell yeah, it's got a good
the best
opening.
part of the series
Yeah.
so far in my book too. Setting the scene. As I mentioned, Soul Society was fun, and I assume
Brilliant.
right for the time. And to this day, it still remains, for me, a solid piece of storytelling. It had a few hiccups
Yeah,
here and there.
awesome.
I would have liked a bit more necessary secondary character involvement, and I would have liked that the twist ending with Aizen be a bit more satisfying. But outside of that, the arc itself deals with some really interesting plot
Well, the Aizen
points,
thing was
does some
perfect.
interesting character exploration for the likes of Ichigo, and sets the bar fairly high for the series in terms of action. It's a competent story, beginning to end, and while I didn't notice any major issues with the Soul Society's introductory sequence either, I also wasn't as excited to read through it, mostly because I sort of had an idea as to where it would otherwise go. Competent as it was still a very traditional and conventional shonen story packed with all the trappings you might expect from the genre. Again, not a bad thing, and I did enjoy it, but something I've learned that I can rely on the Arrancar arc to do consistently is surprise me with its direction and application of existing characters.
Right, yeah.
Remaining true to the foundation set upon prior arcs, all the while managing to string me along with a host of choices I both found surprising and captivating. Despite concluding and resolving the main emotional throughline of the previous arc, carried over into this one are two very compelling plotlines. Uryu's grappling with his own lack of power and
Yeah, he doesn't have it
being
anymore.
both figuratively and literally consumed by his. Two contrasting characters with two contrasting problems. Having established both of these worries and stressors in the prior arc, having delivered the required closure in the prior arc also, now we get to experience and explore the
Like,
ramifications
what happens
of
afterwards,
these two
yeah.
lines of narrative.
Which is
Two
cool.
lines of narrative that complement each other rather brilliantly, might I add. The first set piece or conflict that takes place in this arc occurs when three different entities attack three different characters. Though, right now, I'd like to discuss Ichigo and Uryu's respective conflicts first. And let me tell you, these are near perfect and provide by far the best intro and hook I've received so far from this story as a reader.
Yo.
So, there's this new character in town called Shinji, and he looks all sorts of screwed up. And concerning Ichigo's fight, Shinji represents an easy solution to a terrifying problem that seems to be plaguing Ichigo. The fear of losing himself.
Yeah, like, how do we control this power, man?
Every passing
You're not
day,
alone.
each passing fight, he feels his grip on the hilt of his sword loosening more and more, concerned that one day, the powerful entity that dwells within him we saw last time might take control for good. Speaking to the fear that I explored last time, Ichigo is terrified that this darker
Oh yeah, he doesn't want to lose control and hurt his friends.
always fight against at every possible moment. An exhausting effort for sure, one that makes what Shinji is offering all the more alluring. With him claiming that Ichigo is fighting against his inherent nature, that his true nature is rejecting his decision to be a Soul Reaper, and that he should join him and become something that he calls a Vizard.
That's the
which
one,
just
the
sounds like a
Vizards,
German
yeah.
pronouncing the word wizard. And after a quick Google, I now
Vizard.
realize that it's called Vizard.
There you go.
Mistake.
I'm glad he sorted that out.
Ichigo obviously refuses because, I mean, look at him. With a character
He does
design
look.
like that,
I like that they made him look like a
Rukia, on the
villain.
other hand, seems to have the opposite problem, where Ichigo's power seems to be spiked spiraling out of his control as a side effect of his actions in the last arc, Uryu in this section
We're struggling to even use
sees
it.
the consequences, his own lack of power, as a choice that he ultimately made in the last arc also. And as he's in the heat of battle, with things not going his way, it's revealed that
His father is a Quincy.
the interaction with Uryu's father represents a much more direct approach from one of the two
Makes sense.
parental figures in this arc, and heck, even this chapter. And I will be getting to that, don't you worry. Unlike Ichigo, who is dealing with a physical issue he's terrified of, Uryu is dealing with a moral dilemma his father proposes. He'll get him his powers back, but on one condition. In return, he must never involve himself with Soul Reapers again. Now, I'm interested to see where this goes, as it can offer Uryu two options. Number one, he betrays his father sooner rather than later and retains the good character development he's received thus far. Or, number two, he undergoes a corruption arc where he reverts back to his classic ways, gaining a lot of power in the process.
Wow.
Think Vegeta during the Buu
Kinda, but
This
not.
path is also interesting.
Interesting.
The fight against actually results in a magnificent
How's
moment
the
of
blood war?
reconciliation at the end. Again, a la Vegeta's sacrifice. And if all of these inversions and contrasts to the specific encounters with Ichigo and Uryu weren't enough to suggest that Uryu is on a complementary or contrasting path to that of Ichigo, Ichigo's father too gets introduced as being someone with much more significant powers than we otherwise thought he did.
Oh yeah.
He's a Soul Reaper.
What the hell is
I
happening?
mean, that was
I
surprising to
I
me.
called it with the talisman his father gave him as a means of protecting him because, I mean, I wasn't wrong about it being what it was, a protection spell sort of thing, but
Yeah.
what I was wrong about his mom being the one with the powers. Still, 50% is a pass.
Wow.
And again,
You're kind of not wrong actually.
Uryu's contrasting circumstances. Unlike Uryu's father,
It's really interesting, isn't it, knowing everything when someone else is learning.
In front of the third and final fight that takes place in this arc with Kon, and that one exists entirely for exposition. And to be honest, it's good exposition too. It's exposition that stems from naturally sounding conversations and questions that would be asked by someone like Kon. Questions that led us to answers that explain that this crazy-looking creature here is called an Arrancar. And by extension, this is what the arc is named after. Hollows that take their masks off to gain Soul Reaper
Yeah, they get Soul Reaper powers, yeah. They literally have like a Bankai equivalent.
It's sort of the opposite of what Ichigo seems to be doing here with the Visors. A Soul Reaper who puts on a mask to get more power.
Holification.
More on that a little later. As mentioned, Shinji seems to be offering Ichigo the chance to take control of his life. However, Ichigo does deny this offer outright before running off to check out a source of another large spiritual pressure. But honestly, this section is filled with so many different things that make me rethink this entire story in double take, like Urahara's conversation shortly after with Ichigo's father. I honestly don't fully know what side they are on.
Yeah, like what's going
Maybe
on?
a division of Soul Reaper that exists on Earth to defend it exclusively? Question mark? I don't know. Furthermore, I still
I love the speculation.
I still don't really know about. He's a bit of an enigma. Ichigo's father describes the Visors as a lawless gang of ex-Soul Reapers who tried to acquire hollow powers through forbidden methods. However, given that the Soul Society seem to have issues too, it's hard to say cut and dry whose assessment of who is correct.
They were
or
used
more
as an
specifically
experiment.
who we should believe. Naturally, I think the answer lies somewhere in the middle, but I do enjoy that we seem to be getting this biased interpretation from various groups in the story. It helps it feel much more lively and nuanced. However, there is something to take note of with this specific interaction. Despite being able to dispose of this Arrancar in spectacular fashion, this one is far more developed and powerful than all the others he's ever faced. He suspects Aizen is behind it, thinking he made a deal with the Arrancars so that they can help him achieve his goal, whatever that might be, we still don't know at this point. Meanwhile, Chad and Orihime confront this newly introduced character, Hiyori, and of course Shinji we're all familiar with. Uryu makes a promise to his father in exchange for his powers back, and so with that, it seems that all the pieces are in place for the next large-scale set of plot beats, which I will be breaking down in segments, the first of which being...
Yeah, Nako Vegeta, yeah.
The Arrancar duo versus the forces of Earth. This is really cool, but for a bunch of different reasons, okay? As Ichigo's father pointed out moments ago, while they might suspect Aizen to be behind this, we still aren't certain and furthermore don't even know what he plans to do. If this was all there was to the plot, then I would be singing a very different tune to the predominantly positive one I am right now. Thankfully, the way Kubo has orchestrated and structured this arc serves the slow burn and adds an air of mysterious terror to these monsters that honestly up until now have escaped our understanding. As an emotional through line, we are focused on Ichigo's inner struggle, and as it happens, instances like these are what directly put pressure and emphasis on that struggle. So by virtue of these characters existing in the story,
there's a warning for you, how powerful you've got stuff to come.
By the direct impact these newly introduced characters have on the main source of interest, Ichigo and the gang, all the while keeping us receptive to what they have to say, which, as we soon find out, exposits the true nature of this broader story. So let's take a closer look. The sudden arrival of these two grabs the attention of and sends shockwaves through all the major cast and me as an audience member. Two Arrancars have arrived on the scene. Their names I will not even attempt to try at this point.
Ukiura, and then I can't remember the guy's name.
I trust myself with that sort of responsibility. But for now, I shall refer to them as Vegeta and Nappa, seeing as their sudden appearance both in arrival, reveal, and subsequent action.
Pretty
with
similar.
The big guy killing a
Cool.
bunch of folks.
Love it. Yeah.
Wow. Like when Vegeta and Nappa first touched down on Earth in Dragon Ball Z, all the way down to the framing of the scene.
Ah, that's interesting. Yeah, I never thought about that. Yeah.
The creature Ichigo's father contended with earlier is that they are fully developed.
They are a force to be reckoned with.
Jesus Christ, Chad, is he dead? Holy shit, Orihime is a beast.
Be
Saving Chad
careful.
and managing to block an attack like that from this person. I'm not even kinda kidding here. Orihime has gone from a character that pushed me away, quite literally, from the series when I was watching the anime all that time ago, to one of my favorite female characters.
I just read the manga.
Big three. This is an incredible
Really do,
scene with us potentially on the verge of losing two important and lovable characters.
Here we go.
Oh, thank God. Okay, and this is where the dynamic I love about this arc makes itself known. These two put Ichigo in a bad position, but one he's able to comfortably fight against until suddenly he starts to struggle and lose the battle in his mind. The depiction of this in the manga is pretty cool too.
Damn, oh, that's wicked.
Panels, as if to suggest the dark is both figuratively taking over Ichigo's point of view and literally
And his mind.
in this manga.
Yeah.
This issue is becoming so serious for Ichigo that it literally now means that even with enemies he should have no problem with, he is struggling.
I mean, well, I don't know. I think he would struggle against them anyway.
As we've seen, those he too was defending in Chad and Orihime. Looking over her in bed, recovering now from that very incident, covered in bandages, Ichigo says, Chad got mangled. Tatsuki was almost killed. All because I was too weak.
Damn.
So that's one problem.
It's a lot to put on yourself.
Well, comes by way of these two tactically retreating and passing on this message to Aizen, who shares with us part of this accident.
Good old South Park.
Exposit more about where Arrancars come from, how they begin as Menos, and how, depending on the type of Menos they start off as, how that will dictate what sort of level the Arrancar that emerges
Appears and
Gilead's
ends up
made
as,
for
yeah.
the weakest Arrancars. Adjukas come in the middle of the pack, and Vasto Lourdes making for the elite soldier types.
But you don't want to be elite, because elite's got no integrity.
The strength of which are entirely unknown to us at this point. What we do know, however, is that Aizen plans on making more. And this is where things start to get really, really good. The plot starts to settle down, and we get into the main body of this arc. Following this occurrence, a bunch of familiar faces from the Soul Society show up at Ichigo's school. Rukia is among them, and it's a great reveal.
So nice to
Rukia manages to remind Ichigo of who he is, who she recognizes him as. He needs to become stronger to protect those that need to be protected. But first, we have something
Best friend material right there. Yo, Grimmjow.
This is the first proper invasion of the
Yes,
Earth.
let's go.
A glimpse at what this story has in store for us. And let me tell you, it's pretty awesome. And partially what makes this invasion interesting is that Grimmjow went behind Aizen's back to take out the folks he thought the other two failed to kill. And the stuff that spawns from this is brilliant. Now, obviously there's Grimmjow's fight with Ichigo that acts as the centerpiece and justifiably
So
so.
sick, so
However,
sick.
there are a few other fights that occur with the various Soul Society members after descending from on high, and by far the best battle that came courtesy of these folks, and maybe even this section, has to be the one with Ikaku. Set up as him looking for a place to crash, the tough guy lax attitude that this guy has is infectious, and that honestly surprised me. In the previous arc, I genuinely thought that he was sort of a joke, With his
Yeah, but he comes out with his own Bankai, doesn't he? It's like, wow, you've been training.
He seemed to me
Working.
at the time like a gimmick character. But I was wrong.
Bankai.
Ikaku versus Edorad. Grimmjow, having arrived with a hit squad of 5 other individuals, one of them makes their way towards Ikaku, aiming to kill everyone with a spiritual pressure. And I think I fell in love with Ikaku during this fight. Fighting this guy in the name of finding a place to crash for the night, it starts out charming and fun with Ikaku looking both formidable and kinda dope, not gonna lie. But when the Arrancar awakens his blade, things quickly change. And as things often do in Bleach, the fight gets turned on its head with the good guy character who was once dominating, finding himself in a dicey situation. Get it? Dicey? Because swords?
Yeah, cutting.
And funnily enough, things are going so badly for this dude that this ally of his even sends word to organize a funeral for him. Thankfully, Ikaku has another ace up his sleeve. This looks sick, and
It looks
furthermore,
amazing.
Ikaku comes across as massively impressive and tenacious from this point on. And with his Bankai being a slow starter, the longer the fight goes on, the more powerful it ultimately stands to become. Foreshadowing maybe? Question mark? I don't know. The attack, however, doesn't work, and the battle just sort of ends without him dying. There's a message here about valuing life over honor, and I think it's a great theme these types of manga don't often push. But the ending did feel pretty lackluster compared to the rest of it, particularly after we find out they're all basically nerfed and Ikaku.
Yeah, they can't even go all out.
Outside of Rukia, who didn't get to show us what he's really made of. So hopefully there's more to come from this guy later on in the arc. Matsumoto, Renji, and Toshiro versus whoever they're fighting. This fight is probably the most busy, it
Versus
involves
whoever
3
they're
people,
fighting.
and largely is there to deliver one epic moment and a whole bunch of necessary information. They all win and defeat their respective Arrancars, but it was the announcement that these guys get to use their full power on Earth that took the hype level, for me, to the max.
Let's go.
It's such a great callback to the first arc, and truth be told, I had completely forgotten about that mechanic, and it really surprised me. The main takeaway from the exposition, however, that I could glean was that the main guys we have to look out for are numbered from 10 to 1.
Oh,
the
yeah.
weakest, 1 being the strongest. And of the main 10, apparently, at this moment, Grimmjow is number 6. The plot thickens. Grimmjow versus Ichigo.
Mark's
Grimmjow
favourite
is
boy.
a
Well, yeah,
cool
Grimmjow's
design.
like
Grimmjow has
amazing.
a really cool design. Grimmjow is really strong. Grimmjow is one of the Vasto Lordes. And Chad is isolated, but thankfully it's not Grimmjow that finds him initially, but another of these Arrancars called D-Roy, meaning Ichigo and Rukia need to make their way towards him to make the save. And you know, this is sort of an aside to this whole fight with Ichigo and Grimmjow, but watching as Chad realizes how useless and helpless he is now feels awful. The once enormously powerful Chad now is reduced to nothing but an inconvenience for Ichigo to have to protect, helpless to do anything. It's at this moment in time I realized that I haven't actually seen Rukia fight as a Soul Reaper since the very first chapter of the series, and I think to myself,
That's
can't
true,
be right. So
yeah.
if I am mistaken, please point it out in the comments, because that's crazy. She sees Ichigo as being emotionally compromised, and so takes on the big boy herself, and she is awesome. There are numerous instances where Rukia's Soul Reaper blade is described in detail during the section.
Does all the ice stuff, doesn't it? She does all the ice powers and that. Yeah, so cool.
White the blade is. It's a blink and you miss a sort of description, but my obsessive brain feels like there might be something to that very description. So here's my artistic theory.
So
In
many
this instance, I
speculations.
think it's possible that Kubo, the artiste, has chosen to use her white blade to symbolize a thematic opposite or complement to Ichigo's black blade. A yin to his yang, so to speak. And now that I think
Oh, I like
about it,
that.
both of these characters seem
Yeah.
capable of bringing balance to their respective lives. Her managing to ease Ichigo's mind when he's troubled, and he, in the past, has, in his own way, brought balance to her life by preserving it, and not to mention giving her a friend group. So,
Well, yeah, she
now
got
that I
people to
think
hang out
about
with
it,
now.
maybe they're special or destined to be partners. Or maybe I'm talking out my ass. Only time will tell, I guess. So yeah, this happens. Damn, okay. Ichigo gives everything he has in Bankai form to Grimmjow, and still nothing. Grimmjow, in this instance, is effectively the wall Ichigo has to overcome in this arc, or at least shows us how much farther he needs to be able to go. And what's interesting in this case is that this wall is both physical in terms of the
Grimmjow's like, look at him go, he's just bouncing around, let's go.
Psychological issue Ichigo is having currently. All the way through this fight, I was waiting for something Ichigo could do to tear down Grimmjow, and at one point I was sort of waiting for Rukia to wake up and get the power boost from the others. But in the end, she was too busy being almost dead. Ichigo, in this instance, is very clearly fighting himself as well as his
he's in the demons at the same time as
Rapunzel, who arrives at the last moment to reprimand Grimmjow for invading without permission. Ichigo and maybe everyone else could conceivably have all died. But alas, he survives to tell the tale, but loses the battle to Grimmjow emphatically. I guess we have a short-term goal to shoot for now, in addition to dealing with Ichigo's performance issues. Licking their wounds following this attack, everyone is forced to seek out their own training. Ichigo solicits the help of the Vizards he once.
Let's go, yeah, we need to control it.
Which brings us to what seems to be a necessary part of every Bleach arc,
training.
Alright, so there's this moment that occurs once Ichigo gets to the Vizard base of operations, and I'm pretty sure you all know what I'm talking about. It's really intense, and to be honest, it gave me chills while I was reading it. Partially because of the artwork,
It is cool.
partially because of the implications.
The way they constantly pin him down and stop him, and it's like, whoa.
Himself set this very specific instance up to land as powerfully as it did in the manga. So,
they've all got really interesting abilities as well.
Well, in order to gain control over the hollow inside of him trying to take over, Ichigo must first convince those in Shinji's company that he is worth their effort to train in the first place. Hiyori specifically takes Ichigo to task and goads him into this confrontation. She assumes her hollow form and beats Ichigo to Kingdom Come. Terrified to embrace or even content with what lurks within him, Ichigo refuses to engage at all with what Hiyori is demanding of him. But she does force the hollow out.
Oof. Here we go.
This look of genuine shock and trauma on Hiyori's face.
Wow, yeah, she got no clue.
Now, I do not know what this was depicted or built up like in the anime, but in the manga, it was spectacular.
That looks awesome.
As I mentioned before, Hiyori was introduced alongside Shinji during one of his confrontations with Ichigo back in chapter 189. What I suspect was communicated in the anime was her boisterous, domineering, and unflinching demeanor through voice acting and clever implementation of sound effects and animation. However, in the manga, this, I think, is magnified in its own unique ways. Naturally, her speech bubbles supersede his in pretty much every.
You can generally tell what type of person she is just by looking at her face, though. That's
She
so.
dominated the panel space in the different layouts and pages that visually communicated her personality from the moment we saw her. In her literal introductory page, her character appears as though she is standing on Shinji's cowering face.
Yeah, oh, that's cool because it's overlapping
her body
the.
beyond the parameters of her panel.
That's cool, yeah, overlapping the panel. That's
brilliant, subtle,
that's dead cool.
Fun visual storytelling. This isn't a girl to be messed with, and certainly not one that scares easily. However, when face to face with the terror of Ichigo's darker half,
I'm getting Rebecca vibes from Cyberpunk Edge Runners there.
All the more, with the split second he had her by the throat and the reaction from her friends,
They're all on it.
showing us all we needed to know concerning how serious that instance in time truly was. And what follows this is effectively a confirmation of what I anticipated the story to be about. One where Ichigo learns to live with an aspect of who he is and refuses to allow that aspect he's terrified of to consume him and determine what he is. You could look at this as a metaphor for confronting your problems, not allowing the act of avoiding them to send you spiraling and to dictate to yourself who you really are, rather than be ruled by the risk of losing yourself by what you dislike about yourself. It's also a scene where we get to meet a load of Shinji and Hiyori's allies. They are fun, silly, and I just love it when
they're great.
add some
I do like
characters to
the
mix.
variety of abilities that they have.
The
It makes
premise
it
for
fresh.
this is simple, and how it's visually explored is fun to watch also. Essentially, Ichigo gets to fight himself in his own mind, all the while the state of the fight itself is being depicted outwardly in Ichigo's body as he slowly and then quickly becomes literally consumed by the hollow he's fighting within. It's really cool to look at, and particularly when the monster starts to lose limbs only to regenerate them instantly. And to be honest, it looks kind of sick. I'm not gonna lie. There's a wonderful
Ain't that cool?
framework for the fight that keeps this both consistent and straightforward to follow. Hollow Ichigo consistently refers to himself as Zangetsu, implying beyond the obvious that he is in fact his weapon. And like any great weapon, it needs a wielder worthy of its potential. Furthermore, after addressing Ichigo as king right off the bat when he arrives, I enjoyed the metaphor that was being drawn of the difference between a horse and the king that rides the horse into battle. Naturally, Ichigo's darker half believes that the right course of action is bloody murder left, right, and center.
Let's
but
kill
there are some
everything.
wonderful quotes from this section too. How can you slay with a sheathed sword? Speaking to the failure of Ichigo's very logic. However, the important thing to learn here isn't to fully embrace and give control to Hollow Ichigo, because the opposite of that isn't very good either, but to instead use the power in a controlled and effective way. Because if he doesn't, he becomes as useless as a sheathed sword as he mentioned. And it seems that Ichigo gets that message, at least partially. Grabbing the sword embedded in his abdomen, pulling it from the grasp of his hollow form, visually saying that he is once again taking control, taking the reins of this altercation, punctuated by him taking out his hollow counterpart with one powerful thrust of his sword. His black color once again dominating his form, reclaiming the blade used against him, Ichigo emerges victorious. However, something that I will keep in mind is that this isn't over. While Ichigo has won this particular battle, he has not yet learned the life-changing lesson that will win him the war within. As Hollow Ichigo reminds him before vanishing into his subconscious,
damn.
So while this bodes well for Ichigo in the short term, I wonder how long he has until he finds himself on his knees looking deep within, asking himself how badly he wants to win again. I was recently told that when devising a name for this story, Tight Kubo noted that while Shinigami are associated with black, black itself would be a boring name for the series. White suggested black as a complementary color, and he therefore chose bleach to evoke the impression of the color white. These colors, black and white, seem to be intertwined with the DNA of the story, both narratively and visually. There are a lot of things this story could, in its essence, be about, but in my opinion, it is specifically about the struggle Ichigo's inner conflict represents. The fascination Kubo has with the contrast white evokes onto black speaks to this very direction. It's emblematic of and draws attention to the central conflict of this long series, light versus dark, suggesting not that one is superior to the other, but that one needs both to achieve balance. Chapter 219, page 6 and 7 demonstrate this very conflict.
Wow! Yes, look at that.
One side succumbs to the other, that this contrast and conflict in the page layout stops, and the two colors representing Ichigo merge into one, seen on the hilt of this sword in chapter 221. Returning to the land of the living with a mask now, one side emboldened and marked with black, and the other side clear and white, signifying that when apart they are hollow, and that only when working together are they truly whole. And this very aspect is something that is drawn attention to when Orihime sees him for the very first time after this reconciliation of the two halves. Ichigo's getting really strong, and not in a scary way like before, but it's not in a nice way either, suggesting perhaps that he has found a balance, a mix of both. And this is where the main conflict that informs the rest of the arc comes in. Now that Ichigo is no longer fighting with himself, at least for the time being, he has regained his ability to be useful, to save lives, to protect his allies and town from the coming conflict as Aizen readies to destroy his home and gather 100,000 souls. He has friends that are willing to, much like him, give up their lives in an effort to defend those that
That's true.
Given that he is the one with the most power potential, that responsibility as a protector lands on his shoulders. Conversely, Orihime, Chad, and Uryu's training has a light shone on it for the first time during this period too. However, Orihime gets far more attention, and honestly, I think rightfully so. Towards the beginning of this arc, a greater emphasis was placed on Uryu's journey and choice he needed to make, but in reality has gotten very little focus since, with a tremendous amount of the emphasis placed on introducing new characters, systems, and mechanics. And while I think this is rightfully done, as it is important for us to understand what's going on moving forward, I'm happy that at the very least, the likes of Uryu, Chad, and especially Orihime have an opportunity to express their frustrations, wants, and goals in this portion. There's a fantastic moment towards the beginning of Grimmjow's first invasion where Chad is shown to be defenseless and unable to help Ichigo in his fight. For the very first time, he has become the person who was helpless and powerless, a burden in the way, and I hope more of this aspect of Chad's character is explored in the future as he trains relentlessly. The philosophy his very character represented in the first arc was profound, but was spoken to from the point of view of someone that was powerful, knowing what to do with that power. However, now we get to see him vulnerable. The powerful has become the weak, and so I'm interested to see how he reacts to this new status quo shift. Will he thrive, or just expire and lose relevancy? Only time, I guess, will tell. But for me,
he doesn't really do anything later on, does he? But it's
once again been the
nice that they do still
As
keep
I mentioned
them
moments ago,
going.
Kubo has gone to a tremendous amount of effort to have this be a story concerning Ichigo, but more accurately and generally, the struggle in one's heart to be the best that they can be. with the differences that emerge between the host of different characters that populate this manga showcasing that for us specifically. Orihime is terrific for this very reason, sharing in her own personal struggle in trying to desperately not be a burden, which, like Chad, also harkens back to her struggle in the first arc with her brother. All the while, in this arc, acting as a character with enough emotional maturity to point out for us clear examples of her friends changing for the bad and for the good. I mentioned that she noticed when Ichigo seemed to find balance within himself being a force to be reckoned with, but that quote and that scene really only works in the first place because of what we've heard her say in the past. She's pointed out when Kon was in Ichigo's body that that wasn't Ichigo. She's always picked up on when Ichigo
She can tell all these things, like.
Earlier in this very arc, in order to create the appropriate contrast for when Ichigo eventually achieves balance, she points out in chapter 193 on page 7 that while in his Bankai form, Ichigo feels different. Fiercer, grittier, like it's not even him anymore while he's at war with himself. I adore stuff like this, and Orihime
is nice. That is cool, yeah.
Explored. We've seen her insecurities following her inability to pick up Ichigo when he was down, and we've seen her jealousy when it comes to how successful Rukia has become in doing just that. Being unlike Ichigo,
she wants to be there for him,
constantly struggled with finding his inner balance, Orihime hasn't yet fallen or allowed those weaker and darker feelings she's had impede her ability to see reality. Well, that was until she straight up was told to her face that she isn't enough and should take a backseat courtesy of Mr. Kisuke. Following this news, she's picked up by the person she envied in Rukia. And because she never burned that very bridge, Rukia was able to pick her up in the same way she was able to help Ichigo. It's a wonderful...
Rukia's just awesome. She knows. She can see the best in people, and she knows that they can do better. You just need that push.
With everyone having trained for the last month, this is about where the first arc of this much longer Arrancar arc or saga comes to its final big set piece. And with this conclusion comes a refocusing on a particular character with the story going in a much needed new direction. I could feel this shift.
Does Grimmjow lost his arm at this point?
The best part was, I had no idea where it was coming from, and more importantly,
I can't remember, but if he has... We've missed something quite fun
while
there.
not perfect, was an interesting decision to say the least. So, let's talk about the fights in this invasion, and more specifically, what they actually came here for in the first place. Grimmjow versus Ichigo.
Yeah, he's lost his arm, hasn't he? Why have we not
I think one of the best decisions this arc made was to introduce Grimmjow as this chaotic and unpredictable character. Thanks to him, as an audience, there is this air of uncertainty as we're reading what is on screen. We don't know what they are here for just yet, but we suspect Grimmjow could be acting on his own or going off script at any moment.
Yeah, you're not sure, right?
Unlike Ichigo, who's a great reactionary character, Grimmjow is a fantastic foil to create that plot for Ichigo to react to. And so this fight, at least while I was reading...
No, he hasn't. Alright, yeah, why have we not touched on that, Mark? Alright, okay, no more.
Was the best case scenario
The conflict within the Espada.
he ultimately wants to achieve with this part, a misdirection. And let me tell you, it totally got me. But concerning the fight itself, there are a few noteworthy additions and changes to the status quo to justify this rematch and very much inject interest. Grimmjow is weakened and Ichigo has a cool new party trick. A party trick that functions in the same way as my favorite move from Dragon Ball does. The
Kaioken, yeah.
Much like the Kaioken, this holification offers Ichigo the chance to boost
his
power up
for a short amount of time.
However, only for a short amount of time and with a great cost or risk to himself.
They're always the best ones to throw in, isn't it?
Well, bad stuff.
I only have so long.
Because of this, apart from looking cool in every sense of the word, it also brings with it a new level of tension to the fight. We wait for Ichigo to use it, we anticipate how his foe will react and deal with this new power, and we worry every single moment he uses it because, as of right now, he can only use it for like 11 seconds, which is an hilariously short amount of time for a power boost in a fight. I might even go as far as to say that it offers something more than Kaioken does in Dragon Ball, and therefore might be more interesting to me. Because there is that added fear of not just physical overexertion, but the collapse of Ichigo's mind too. It's a brilliant ruffle to this already engaging and fun moveset Ichigo has at his disposal. The initial attack Ichigo lands is stunning, and seeing Grimmjow scared after being so cocky is honestly thrilling. Ichigo utterly obliterates him in one attack, leaving Grimmjow stunned and confused by the difference Ichigo is demonstrating in his ability. The fight continues for a few moments with Ichigo landing another big attack, but his mask crumbles.
Time out.
And he's out of time.
Oh yeah.
Switching gears for a second, and I will go back to this, don't worry. We check out what's going on at the same time with Toshiro Ikaku, this guy, and Matsumoto,
This
the
guy.
Arrancar. Urahara shows up to fight.
Never in my life have I needed something so much and never known until I received it.
Realizing that this was one of, if not the only time I had seen Urahara fight properly, made it all the more
It shows us that he is
quite a bit about his character.
like
Time to
a
make
deal.
save on Matsumoto. Throughout this battle, he uses many different interesting tactic-based approaches, not limited to a decoy gigai, proving himself to be a very analytical fighter, much more brains than brawn, though not lacking in either department, really. It very much paints him as a thinking man Soul Reaper, which is a nice change of pace and
He's a clever guy.
style,
Very clever
with
man.
what little I know already about Urahara as of right now. Right, so that's that fight. How are things going with Ichigo again? Oh yeah, not good. Oh shit!
Come on, Rukia. Yeah.
Yes! After leaving Orihime to take the long way home from Soul Society, Rukia arrives just in the nick of time to block a devastating attack from Grimmjow onto Ichigo, one that would have surely been his end. With Grimmjow now frozen, Rukia moves to check on Ichigo, but gets grabbed by Grimmjow, and then... Holy shit again! Shinji saves the day. This was brilliant to sit and read through. He even fires his own Serro Blast at him, which is really cool that he uses hollow-based moves. It's just something that I don't really see that often. Nevertheless, Grimmjow blocks it at the last possible moment before being stopped in his tracks by Ulquiorra, who quietly informs him that apparently the mission has already been accomplished. Orihime has been secured. She was the target. I did not
Like
see that
what?
coming.
Yeah, that was a bit of a whoa. What's going on?
That sets up the next arc's goal, and it's a goal I can 1000% get behind because, as I said, I love her character. And what follows this is perhaps the best Orihime chapter of all time, or at least thus far in the series. But before I get into that, I'd like to touch on one aspect of this saga, or arc, if you want to call it that I didn't like.
Oh.
It was a choice that was instrumental in creating these circumstances that, while good, came about in a sort of strange way. And it's all because of a really dumb decision Urahara made. As someone that's depicted as this analytic...
Very, very clever guy, yeah.
His reasoning for pushing Orihime away like he did to stay out of the battle seems so incredibly short-sighted and irresponsible. If he knew or suspected they would come for her, why not guard her?
Yeah,
Why
like
not
protect
tell
her, yeah.
Why leave her defenseless? This is what I personally don't like in stories. Kubo clearly needed Orihime to get captured in private by this specific individual. And in order to achieve that, Kubo decided to compromise a specific character's integrity. It's not a decision I can get behind personally, so let's just move on.
Okay.
Orihime's goodbye. Unlike other arcs, this one concludes on a very somber note, offering not Ichigo, but instead Orihime the spotlight. A private moment of introspection and vulnerability no other character has shared with us thus far in this series. It's moments like this I adore when a story takes the time to explore and bask in a specific character's mental space. After being given this bracelet that wraps her in a special spiritual membrane, she has 12 hours to say her goodbyes to one person and one person.
Only, yeah.
They won't be able to hear or perceive her, but she does choose one person.
Ichigo, of course.
Ichigo.
Of
Her
course.
goodbye to the man she loves is the sweetest chapter this manga has delivered, and the care Kubo places on the smallest of movements is truly touching, illuminating for us as Ichigo rests the world Orihime dreams of. One where she could be all the different things she loves and is interested in. She is, after all, a very sporadic and eclectic character. However, no matter how many interests she might have, no matter how many foods she might like or jobs she might conceivably try in her lifetime, no matter how many versions of her might be possible, she admits that they would all fall in love
With Ichigo.
And that right there, that not only is a beautifully sweet sentiment, but is one, as as true to her as any other piece of dialogue that has ever been written by Kubo for her.
Amazing.
And it's, I think, one of the strongest examples of character writing in this entire series. It's truly a fantastic scene and a brilliant chapter. Interesting, however, yet another example of good exposition. Despite being in some sort of astral form that's supposedly imperceptible, she manages to heal him before she goes, leaving behind her unique spiritual pressure and ultimately providing a brilliant way of sending a signal without breaking the claws of what her bracelet represents.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the end of this arc, with Orihime in the clutches of Aizen and our heroes readying themselves for an adventure to a dangerous land unlike any that we've...
Let's go save the princess in the castle again. Which is fine.
While I am invested in Orihime's story and her relationship with her friends, particularly Ichigo, I am also aware that this is a very similar setup to that of the Soul
There you
Society
go.
arc. So
There you
from
go.
this point on, I'm curious to see what Kubo can offer in the way of differentiating
Making
or
it different,
adding variety to the mix in this situation, as this does have a few important differences to the Soul Society to play with, not the least of which is the character of Aizen having been established, as well as these new creatures. But only time will tell, and for you all watching, you don't have to wait to see my thoughts on this like I did, because this is a special two-part video, so let's dive straight into the next arc of the saga without delay.
Alright. Cool.
I want to say from the outset, before diving into this section, that if my opinions don't line up with your own, it should go without saying that I'm not trying to invalidate your experience. Many of you watching have either exclusively watched the anime, which I haven't, and or have read the manga while it was coming out weekly, which I didn't. This arc has a lot, and I mean a lot of fighting, so when it comes
Yes,
to
it
pacing
does.
reading week to week, I can totally imagine a world where that would have been irritating for some readers out there. However, my experience binging the whole thing this week has been massively positive, so I figured
What a
before
binge,
we
man.
venture
What a
forth into
binge.
the void beyond of Hueco
Yeah.
Mundo, that
Excuse
was
me.
worth addressing. Now, one of the biggest criticisms of this arc is that it feels too much like the Soul Society, and having read over 60 chapters of this arc now, I can see where that criticism is coming from, and it isn't entirely unfounded. Structurally, there are a lot of similarities, and if you really want to strip it down to its bare components, it is a chunk of story contending with freeing one of their female friends from captivity after they willfully go there in an effort to protect their friends from danger. That is unavoidably true. However, I think suggesting that it is a carbon copy of the previous arc with nothing...
Yeah, it's not exactly the same.
is going
It's not exactly the
far
same.
too
It's
far.
not exactly
While
the
it is
same.
important to accept the similarities, I think it's critical if you want to be balanced and fair to also take note of what this particular story is trying to achieve, because it's quite a bit different to Soul Society in some important ways. First of all, in a similar fashion to that of the Substitute Shinigami arc, it's impossible to divorce the significance of what that first invasion or first part of this greater arc or saga did in order to lead into this particular section. While the driving force of Soul Society was to, broadly speaking, shine a light on Ichigo's personal development and Rukia's interpersonal development, through he having to learn to trust himself and Rukia learning to see herself as someone worth the time of day, the Arrancar arc clearly has its own unique story it wants to tell that continues the journeys explored through the likes of Substitute Shinigami and Soul Society respectively. In other words, they're similar in structure, but totally different in what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. How Ichigo performs and develops in this arc is a direct evolution from Soul Society.
Oh yeah,
It's
definitely. He's
part of his
grown.
journey,
My
and
God.
having now completed that last arc, his exploits in that very story have led him to making some fundamental errors in the opposite direction with this one, where he himself wishes now to take on all the responsibility, denying his friends the chance to contribute to the greater mission and give it a greater chance of success. So in a way, Ichigo's story in this arc not only is different to Soul Society, but it's the exact opposite. It focuses on what is outwardly happening and concerning Ichigo rather than solely what is inside him. And it does show the fight that this story offers also. Could this story have been told in a different way, with a different structure to that of Soul Society?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably, but it didn't detract at all from what I like about this arc, because, as I've outlined right now, this is only the midsection of this greater Arrancar arc, and it goes in a very different direction, all things considered, which is the most important thing for me. But enough preamble. What did I think of this arc's events? So, Ichigo arrives at Mr. Urahara's place and hops into the Void Beyond reluctantly with the help of Chad and Uryu, who justified to him to go on this mission because Ichigo is technically going against the orders of the Soul Society. It's a tenuous at best excuse that his dad almost certainly will buy, but it is still technically correct, which, as we all know, is the best kind of correct. There's some interesting scenes set also with the likes of Tatsuki that I assume will be addressed when they return in the next section of the story. And following that, we get some really interesting insight into how important Orihime might actually become to not only this story, but Ichigo specifically and his journey. I'm about to share a prediction, a theory, if you
My
will.
God, not again.
With tinfoil hats on, we learn that Orihime is effectively this miracle healer. So much so that she can
Time
restore
manipulation,
individuals'
isn't it?
bodies to a point where they once were perfectly fine. It's sort of like rebooting to previous save files. It's nuts. Grimmjow lost his arm earlier in the story, but now he
Yeah,
has it
how did he
back.
lose it, Mark?
So
How?
this is where my
Let's
theory
talk about the
comes in.
conflict within the
theme,
Arrancar.
really the soft goal of this greater arc is to explore the importance of trust and teamwork for Ichigo. To fight against shouldering the weight of the world alone when others can help. For when Ichigo does shoulder the world's problems, he runs the risk of losing himself to the hollow inside of him. It's a cool consequence of him overexerting himself that I know will eventually happen later on in the story. It just has to. So,
That's the
what
Lord
if
Ichigo.
when he does, what if he does lose himself and can't bring himself back from the brink until Orihime steps in? What if her powers grant her the ability to do just that? That would keep her as the focus of the story while also playing into the theme of trust and teamwork being a necessary part of what Ichigo should learn to appreciate. The weakest in terms of battle now suddenly becomes the most crucial component of making Ichigo, one of the most powerful, live up to his potential. Now, this is just a theory, but I think it's a good one. I'm sure if nothing else, she'll be healing him sporadically throughout this journey, which again reinforces the themes anyways. Oh, and before moving on, there's this conversation with the two dads of Ichigo and Uryu that doesn't manifest in anything meaningful within this section, so I'll hold off on discussing that until it does become relevant. The arrival. The initial landing in the land of the Arrancars, Weko Mundo, is pretty cool. There's a
Weko
decent
Mundo.
amount of variety in the environment
It's
from scene to
huge.
scene, whether it be battles in the desert, run-ins in a castle-like structure, or just voids of darkness with the likes of Aizen and a certain other Kayan character. And with that variety comes Uryu and Chad's chance to demonstrate how capable they truly have become by kicking the asses of these lowly Arrancars, I guess. It's great that we're reinforcing the themes of this story right off the bat, and we get an idea of what awaits them on this journey. There's also a nice touch with Uryu's character that's drawn attention to early on, as he's able to absorb and become empowered by the Reishi in the atmosphere
Yeah,
of this
sick.
place. Thus
Just like the Soul
loses
Side
his
suit.
powers. However, while this is cool and leads to some cool moments for him specifically, there isn't much relevance to this Reishi being in the atmosphere beyond the power boost for him specifically. It doesn't facilitate any narrative switch, if that makes sense. At least not yet that I've read anyway. It did, however, bring to my attention that Rukia might be an anomaly when it comes to regaining her powers through Reishi, seeing as Ichigo can't seem to absorb it for his benefit like Uryu can.
These guys are boss. These guys are class.
This is Nell. And this is
No!
where we meet Nell and her friends. And when I first met
Best
them, I
girl.
thought they were fine, albeit a little cumbersome. I did figure that they were going to be our exposition sidekick type characters, for lack of a better term, in this journey. But I was wrong. Really wrong. Nell is awesome.
Nell's
but
amazing.
For now, they need saving.
And very capable. Rukia!
Okay, Rukia's here. That is cool. Now we have another person for Ichigo to be okay with working alongside. This is great, but this is also at the point where we arrive at a crossroads, so to speak, with multiple passageways open to explore. And Rukia suggests to split up. Now, personally, I've always been with Shaggy on this one. Splitting up, looking for clues,
Yeah,
opens
stay
the gap
together,
to all
guys.
sorts of mayhem, and while good for the purposes of Scooby-Doo and apparently this arc for tension, I don't think it's unreasonable for Ichigo to say that this might be a bad idea. There are better ways to communicate his urge to push away from accepting help than by trusting his friends to isolate themselves in the most dangerous place that currently exists in this world. But whatever, I guess we're splitting up.
Let's do it.
Ichigo's first encounter on this path of his is quite tough. He's forced to turn into his hollow form again for like a second, and the fight is weirdly long, but honestly, I'm not sure exactly why it is. I want to talk about this arc's action and sheer quantity of its fighting, but again, I have that saved for later in this video, so look forward to that. From what I can gather, there's some reinforcement of themes in this fight, as well as demonstrating to us that Nell is something special, something much more important than this impish character she seems to be showing. Because in addition to this crazy Kero or Cero blast, she also has healing capabilities.
Well, she's one of the original Sparta, isn't she? So.
While I haven't dedicated much time of this review to touch on what Uryu has been doing, I do want to show some appreciation to this new dynamic made between this Arrancar companion of Nell's, who's acting as the funny man, to Uryu's straight man. I don't know how this translates in the anime, but in the manga, it's pretty inoffensive and it got a giggle out of me here and there. That aside, what I do think is worth mentioning, however, is the conclusion to the fight he has with this random bug Arrancar that's number 105.
The room of pillars. It's the Bleach abridged, isn't it? Yeah.
Similarly to Ichigo, Uryu didn't want to use his ace in the hole just yet. However, unlike Ichigo, which saw him and Nell show mercy, Uryu didn't, leaving their victims there helpless. It isn't mentioned again in this section, but I think it is a good contrast that was made between these two that is obviously showcased by its placing in the story. But enough about that. Let's talk about Chad. What did I think of his contribution to this section? Well, not a lot. Because Chad doesn't get a lot in this section, if I'm being honest. But he did get a pretty sweet new shield to attach to his arm.
Yeah, the other arm was
That
cool,
hype there. Okay, jokes aside, it's cool that in keeping with his philosophy that he isn't an attacker but a defender, the guy
He's
grew
a shield,
to
yeah.
protect people. And what's more is, he even unlocks his other arm in an offensive measure. He is neither Soul Reaper nor Quincy, he says, but a human channeling hollow powers. And so, I guess we have the trifecta. A Quincy, a Hollow, and a Soul Reaper. However, following that, he runs into this Arrancar and promptly goes to sleep for the rest of this video.
Well, yeah, because you've got one of the Espada.
You're a real hero. It is cool though, getting
Has he mentioned that they're called the Espada yet?
Loss of his spiritual pressure, including Orihime, that does put a lot of pressure on her once again. However, thankfully, following this, we get a much more interesting scene. Rukia versus her demons. This one is really creepy.
Oh, the guy that used to, like, train her?
Like, this scene legit fooled me, and still kinda has me fooled. I don't know. So, while hurrying to Chad's location to help him, Rukia gets blindsided by some Arrancar that knocks her into the shadows. The perfect dark environment to tackle this subject matter, might I add, because it's revealed that this is Kyan.
Well, it's not.
I'm sorry, what? He explains how he got there and that he has a plan, but right at the end, when he has her trust, he just straight up attacks her. She just about manages to dodge this, but this just gave me chills while reading. I've touched on this in other videos, but there's a technique in writing called dramatic irony, and it's used when we as an audience know more than the characters in the scene do.
Yeah, that's
It's a
cool.
common technique, it's really effective, it's popular in pantomime with people shouting to the poor actors on stage,
All
and the bad
right,
guy is
just
behind you.
look behind you.
It's good for building tension, but this scene decides to do the exact opposite and keep us just as unsure as Rukia is. And man, is it creepy and brilliant all at the same time. The following chapter is filled with manipulation that feels wrong and yet flirts with being strangely believable too. It's wonderful and ends with Rukia demanding that whoever this is to never say Kyan's name
Again, yeah.
Watching this Arrancar at will explain their powers and transform back into Kyan is terrifying and depicted quite unsettlingly too by Kubo, might I add. I think the fact that they try so earnestly to convince her that they are in fact Kyan, time and again, is the most unsettling aspect of it. They consume dead hollows and take their powers, and this is great, but it does remind me of what I want to talk about, and that's the fights in this arc, and some of the ones that I've glossed over. I want to explain why I've done this, so here it goes. Bleach's battles.
Right.
In the interest of being fair, because this review is largely very positive, I think it's also important to draw attention to this arc's and perhaps Bleach's weakest aspect that I've noticed thus far, one that is such for many of the series' detractors, and that is the repetitive, cyclical, and perhaps formulaic nature of many of its fight scenes. One of the few parameters of a story I am privy to before I begin my blind read-throughs like this is the length of the material. And one of the concerns I had going into this when I noticed its length was how it was going to use those fights to create interest in that time frame. Brevity for me is a virtue in a story, so when I see a lot of chapters, I hope for its sake that it makes use of that time rather than just bloat itself. For Bleach, like many other shonen stories, fighting is the language of its narrative and story. Characters progress through difficult mental blocks, compromising circumstances, and come
Brings
out on
out,
top or
like,
fail in order to propel the
emotions and
story
shit.
forth into the next story beat. This is important, I love it, and particularly for the likes of Ichigo, his entire story is centered around the defense of his friends from danger through fighting. Where my gripes, however, stem from in this case is through the lack of variety when it comes to many of the fight structure that don't involve Ichigo, the main character specifically. Or heck, sometimes even those that do. The Soul Society and this Hueco Mundo section provide a lot of this, particularly with its secondary characters, where a good guy and bad guy confront each other. There's sometimes a back and forth. One of them reveals a big power boost, and the other guy looks concerned.
This is my ability. Oh god, that's strong. How do I fight it? You can't, but I can. He did. Wow.
If that person is on the back foot and is a good guy. There are plenty of repetitive scenes that follow this structure, and when it came to Soul Society, I found this all the more irritating because, at the time, Kubo struggled to keep the secondary casts like Orihime, Chad, and Uryu relevant contributing members of the story.
Yes.
And as I mentioned, because the story of this manga is told through fighting, if their fights don't contribute to the
then
story,
how's the story going to progress?
Very much like bloat or filler. And while that didn't bother me all that much while I was reading it all in one go, I can absolutely empathize with someone
weekly
who read
release.
this as a weekly release. It's an entirely different set of circumstances compared to what I have at my disposal right now. However, and this is a big however, I will say that because Bleach structures its fights this way, Kubo actually managed to deliver a genuinely impactful surprise to me, and it was through Rukia's fight with this imposter Kaya. As I mentioned, when it feels like a particular outcome is built up to, it's normally superseded by
the abridged episode of that was so fun.
Unlikely save at the last minute. This, of course, creates the problem that when something unlikely happens all the time, then it becomes likely.
Yeah, because you know, you expect the unexpected.
However, during this build-up to Rukia's spirit being broken and this fake Kaien lining up his final shot to take her out, because the good versus evil dynamic was so well defined, because it felt like Kubo was writing her to feel broken, because of what I had experienced in this story all the way leading up to this, when Kubo actually followed through with it and showed Rukia legitimately get impaled, I was utterly shocked.
Yeah,
Prior
it's
to
very
this,
shocking.
I had found myself thinking, oh, here we go again. Who's going to make the save on her this time? Only to turn the page
And then
and
no one.
discover
Yeah.
that, nope, no one did. So, ironically enough, this was a nice
Divert
misdirection
expectations
by doing
there.
what we were told was likely to happen in the first place. I don't think I've ever experienced that with a manga before, so that was kind of
that's cool.
made all the more effective to me by how it managed to, after this, segue nicely into a flashback for Rukia herself to reconcile her relationship with Kaien. This number 9 Arrancar has offered her the chance to exercise her demons by accepting that while Kaien's powers and body might be fighting her, his heart will always be with her. She lives on to carry his memory, to not die alone. It's a wonderful conclusion to a great series of chapters and, ironically enough, was made all the better due to a gripe I believe I had with Bleach's action. And what's more is that unlike prior arcs where I've complained people tend to get stabbed only to then shake it off moments later, this arc keeps people down. Rukia get impaled? Well, she's out for the count.
Yeah.
And the same is true for Chad, so I really do appreciate that. It creates more tension around the future.
Yeah, you are right, yes. There is definitely more tension with the fights within the Arrancar arc.
Looks like. I pointed out issues I've had with Bleach, so let's look at a story that I think does it quite well in places. So, we all know Dragon Ball. It's not the perfect series, but I have a fondness
Of course
for
we're
it.
going to Dragon Ball. It's what Mark based his created his whole channel.
One thing it does really well, I think, is using fighting to drive its narrative, particularly in Dragon Ball Z and early Dragon Ball. The Namek and Frieza arc is one of my favorite arcs of all time, and this
Yeah, it's incredible.
The
The Namek Frieza arc is
to interweave
boss.
narrative and importance into the more pivotal fights like the Ginyu Force and Frieza. So let's look at something a little more lower in scope and stakes. Vegeta versus
Zarbon.
They have two fights
Interesting.
together. The two fights are very different, and they both tell two parts of a greater story. Initially, Vegeta strikes up a fight with Zarbon, thinking that he's the cat's pajamas, only to find out he's really the dog's dinner. That
Yeah,
is
and
until
Zarbon's got a
Hero comes
transformation
back
as well.
stronger than ever to overpower and kill Zarbon. This fight, in addition to telling a self-contained story of arrogance and struggle, also has significant consequences. Zarbon, one of the main people underneath Frieza, dies, and what's more is, without this fight, the Zenkai boost mechanic that was introduced wouldn't be nearly as clear as it otherwise ends up being. And so, if you remove this fight, the story itself makes much less sense.
Yeah,
as a
definitely.
result. And so that's when you know you have for yourself a good addition to a story. When a fight ticks all these boxes, you've got yourself a fight that drives the narrative.
Yeah.
And while I do
Cool.
love
Oh, that is a good example.
this arc
Fine.
offered
Fair.
Rukia with her personal story and what they offered Chad with his physical development, wish that in addition to having an impact on the characters' personal journeys, they would also have a greater consequence for the broader arc.
For the rest of it,
within
yeah.
this section that I'm covering, Chad just goes to this realm to get a shield and sleep for a while. Okay, that's a bit harsh, but still.
No, but you're not wrong though, yeah.
To trust in others more, why are we not using these characters to drive home the value of that mentality, instead of making these individuals just another name on a list of people that he has to save? But maybe this will be rectified in the next section, who knows? Maybe I'm speaking too soon. It's not a huge deal, just something I thought was worth mentioning. Stuff like this was real, because Ichigo's priorities are evident for all of us to see in this interaction. And it sort of highlights what's interesting about Arrancars when compared to Hollows. There's a nuance to how they go about things. They're all different in personality.
Yeah, they have like emotions and stuff going on when they say they don't.
Appearing totally innocuous and nice, while others are, well, neutral. And in this case, Ichigo seems to have no interest or need to fight Ulquiorra and just moves on until... Yeah, okay, fuck this guy.
Yeah, that changes everything.
Once disinterested Ichigo walking away is seen clashing in an instant with this Arrancar. It's an extremely effective use of the page turn too, by the way, and from that moment on, Ichigo just goes all out, but this time to no effect. I love the paneling in this short sequence. It's all laid out to make Ulquiorra as clinical and matter-of-fact as possible. Not to mention imposing. He doesn't boast or have much bravado about him, but he does watch, he does block, and he does tell it as it is, and he reveals to Ichigo that his best isn't enough.
It's not good enough.
Furthermore, he's only number 4.
Yeah.
And there are 3 people stronger than him. He leaves Ichigo defeated after 1 strike and doesn't kill him? Now that's interesting, at least to me. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks as though he hasn't killed anyone yet. In fact, he's done the opposite, reprimanding that very behavior in Grimmjow. And speaking of Grimmjow, with Ichigo lying lifeless in the previous scene, he reminds me of why I love his character.
Grimmjow!
The plot just happens when this guy is on screen. Ichigo is great and all that, but it's so obvious why people love Grimmjow. Unlike the majority of the characters in this story, he actually makes decisions that aren't reacting to something, and these decisions he actually makes have consequences. Along with Orihime, this guy is a driving force that keeps me engaged with the story. Grimmjow just shows up at Ichigo's body, heals Ichigo with Orihime. That is a brilliant twist of the plot, by the way. It's interesting, and because we already have an idea of what Grimmjow is like as a character, we kind of understand why he's doing this. He wants a rematch, and hilariously, once Ulquiorra catches wind of this, the dude comes back into frame for like 3 seconds before Grimmjow just puts him in timeout for like 3 hours.
Oh yeah, he just traps him away, doesn't he?
It's not mentioned again in this section. This weird timeout thing Grimmjow uses here, it has to be a mechanic used in the climax of this arc. Its use here is just too perfect for it not to be. So, I'm calling it now. This technique, or whatever it is going to be used in the climax to some significant degree. It just has to be.
No.
The fight itself between Grimmjow
Trying to remember, I don't think it is.
Is brilliant, and one aspect of it that really caught my attention is the amount of focus Ichigo's eyes receive from Orihime, who starts to believe she can't see Ichigo in there anymore, and on the opposite side of the spectrum, Grimmjow remarks frustratedly that Ichigo always has this look in his eye. With or without the mask, perhaps alluding to the idea that we are all not simply one emotion or one component, but instead a complex web of
this
and qualities
is going to end
the idea behind
just before the invasion. So the invasion arc is the next part, right? Timed these reviews perfectly for Thousand Year Blood War release, hasn't it? Interesting.
Thus creating what Grimmjow sees in him when they fight consistently, and the distance that appears between Orihime and what she's familiar with when she peers into him usually. However, it is important to point out that it's not entirely gone. In fact, I would go as far as to say that that point is crucial.
It's weird, because I've watched like the majority of the filler stuff as well. It seems like there should be so much more to the reviews, but there's not, is there? It makes the story seem very short.
And he's able to turn that positivity into physical results,
Go ahead.
thereby showing us the utility of that positive, virtuous quality over simply losing oneself to base urges for war and pain. In other words, a controlled anger instead of a mindless storm.
Absolute rage, yeah. And then Grimmjow, get out the way.
So this bit I found quite interesting as we get to interact with this legitimately threatening character while also learning a great deal about
No.
But before that, during this time there's this other fight, and it's been a section of the story I haven't been showing a lot of love to in this review, and that's because, for the most part, Renji and Uryu, despite being characters I otherwise enjoy, their fights in this section honestly feel like afterthoughts. And as the
Yeah, they're not very integral, are they?
Running alongside the main one, it feels so much less interesting and consequential by comparison. And that sucks. I want to see these guys, but every time we switch to them, all I think about is how much longer I have to wait until we get back to the
next fight
story.
and what's actually happening, yeah.
It's not because their fight is bad, but more so because it doesn't seem to proceed at all while we are spending time there. Anyway, back to Nell.
Here we go. Witness the fitness. Yes.
That these high-level ranking Arrancars aren't always evil creatures. They're not monstrous, but she does have monstrous power. However, she's from a time that has since passed, and her power ranking is outdated. So let's see how she fares against this chap. There's a really good
What level was she? I can't remember.
Fight Neutra number 5, then number 8 had with Nell following his defeat in their last duel in the past. It's filled with some really great quotes, and here's a few. She says after he demands she kill him, we are humans who became hollows, then regained our reason by becoming Arrancars. Rational beings need a reason to kill, and you don't have one. Neutra, frustrated, says that he does, that he doesn't like her. And she responds, that's not a reason.
That's an instinct,
That's an instinct. You're a beast. I don't recognize you as a warrior, and I refuse to burden myself with your life. Apart from being a cold as hell response from Nell, back and forth and really Bleach's whole philosophy when it comes to fight scenes has caused me to reflect quite a bit on what exactly makes a fight scene captivating. I spoke prior about how story structure can be communicated through fighting, but I think it's only fair I also draw attention to something Bleach does better than most other fight-centric stories with regards to its action. It's this notion of good versus evil, rational versus instinctual, light versus dark that seems to dominate not just manga, not just Western media, but has permeated throughout most cultures. I don't want to get too broad and fundamental here, but I think Bleach taps into something sort of foundational when it comes to our appreciation as a species for fighting. When you look at fighters like Anthony Joshua, Tony Ferguson, and Conor McGregor, you see more than just a fighter. You see a story. It's
there's personality, there's
WWE has been
a person
so successful and persistent across multiple decades. The fight itself is interesting, but it's the story that comes along with it that makes it the whole package. Speaking as someone from Ireland, back in the day, my father, brothers, and heck, even my work colleagues would go on and on about how amazing Conor McGregor's journey was. How he came from virtually nothing and put it all on the line every single night to achieve his goal. We watch for that story. We see ourselves in that tale, and when opportunities presented themselves where the hero of the story falls, we get further engrossed because those are the moments that define us. Will the darkness in those moments you needed to channel in combat overtake you and define who you are? Or will you be able to push forward and do the right thing, irrespective of your circumstances? In the case of Conor McGregor, following his second fight against Dustin Poirier, it's clear to see what happened. Confused and ashamed, he spewed vulgar, nothing insults out of instinct. A pathetic final gasp to keep fighting for the sake of it, despite the conclusion already having been reached. And I think Bleach is playing with those same ideas. Foundational principles of not just fighting, but vicarious storytelling that we as a society look to for inspiration. Can we see someone go to the brink, put themselves into that dark place, and emerge once again as intact, rational, and good people? Or will they become a slave to
completely
the
change,
they utilize? A monster lacking in rational thought, fighting out of, as Nell puts it, instinct. Concerning Bleach, this becomes particularly interesting when we add Arrancars into the mix. At this point, we've clearly seen where hollows come from, and we also understand that Arrancars themselves come from hollows. But not all Arrancars are monsters, sort of in the same way that not all Soul Reapers are good and not all Monsters are bad.
Well, yeah, that's a decent comparison now, isn't it?
It adds a layer of grey nuance to each encounter, proving that Arrancars, by virtue of being what they are, do not necessarily mean that they themselves have been consumed by that very darkness Ichigo is so afraid of. But yeah, these are just the thoughts I have following this section as Nell returns to being a child and the fight becomes less interesting, albeit a bit more exciting, with the addition of a certain someone.
Kenpachi, yes.
The dude absolutely bodies Tesla in a single hit and just says, next, as if it was nothing. I love this guy. His
he's so sick.
Is infectious, and it's with this wave of awesome awesomeness ride the other captains in Kenpachi's stead, all arriving on the scene with the downed members of Ichigo's party, Chad, Rukia on the verge of death, but now all with a very good chance of survival. It's an exciting turn of events. This dude Byakuya fights has a power where he can take control of bodies where he places this symbol on them. Regardless of this, Byakuya is ruthlessly confident, severing the connective tissues to his limbs that get compromised instantly. And then Rukia gets possessed. Byakuya uses his Bankai and thus creates more objects than his enemy can control, ending the fight, and oh look, he appears behind him. That's another trope I've recognized in these scenes from during fights. However, while I don't find the structure of these fights themselves interesting, I do oftentimes find that I enjoy the substance of them with regards to
He's one of the fastest Arrancars though, isn't he?
Might not be interesting, but why he's fighting in this instance is sort of telling. Not from a place of authority anymore or with a sense of duty, but for his family. For, as he puts it, his pride. It's a nice indication that he's developed from the place he was prior to the Soul Society.
Oh yeah, God, he's grown so much.
He's just as callous and psychotic as ever.
Oh yeah, he never changed.
His opponents alongside Uryu. From a plot perspective, it's again not that complex, but from a back and forth perspective, it goes through the phases of combat.
God, the thing he does that Arrancar is just mental.
Shot of Kuratsuchi's assistant ultimately being used.
Whoa, that looks so much different in the
it's gross
anime.
and morbid. However, Kuratsuchi has a contingency more sadistic than anything we've heard in this story. Like something taken straight out of Black Mirror, he drugs the Arrancar such that his senses are altered to perceive time and movements impossibly slowly, making his death at his hands slow and agonizing. Centuries of done.
Yeah, like,
What
he's dead,
hell
but he's
that must be to endure.
still living it.
To Byakuya's fight, the structure is repetitive and predictable. It's the substance, however, that provides the
Yeah, that was
interest. Those
dark.
fights, in terms of
Wow.
artwork, flow, character moments, I just
He
wish
is
they had
messed
a bit
up,
more
man.
variety when it came to the fight's main beats
Messed
themselves. Anyways, back at the Kenpachi fight. The fight rages on, and of these three fights, it's this one which is the most competitive. This has a lot of wonderful moments again, lots of standard shonen fanfare, but again, I find myself asking how necessary this fight is to the overall finish to this arc.
Very much so actually, because Kenpachi and think they need to be here because it's part of Aizen's plan, isn't
The
it?
story has a lot of fighting, and at this point it feels less like a necessary component of the arc itself and more so a formality, if that makes sense. While Byakuya and Kuratsuchi demonstrated some change from when we last saw them, I don't think it's enough to justify over 10 chapters to these guys in the middle of everything. It feels sort of like we're doing these fights out of an obligation because there are so many Arrancars, and so we decided to drag these characters into the picture to give us a break from the main cast, to add variety. And while it does do that, it feels more like a bandage rather than a solution. And so, as a result, I think of all the fights that take place following Ulquiorra being locked away, most of them felt like they were biding time for me. Now, some of them are much more enjoyable than others, but take out this character or that character on the Arrancar side, and not much is lost.
I mean, you aren't wrong either on that aspect. Like, you don't need to have these fights. These characters don't really add much to the plot, yeah, that they're fighting. Yeah. But later on when you learn that it was part of Aizen's plan to have them there for when he invades, yeah, so.
Orihime is literally yeeted from before Ichigo and transferred back to Aizen in an instant. This does create an obvious goal to continue the story, and it does broaden it through the introduction of a threat to Karakura Town, following Kenpachi reminding Ichigo that that's his town to protect. But to remove Orihime from them in what feels like a very cheap fashion just robs a large chunk of this arc, and particularly this section,
I don't know, because we're progressing into this bit now.
To suddenly reappear and start complicating things again, but instead this sort of feels like a soft reset of the status quo. Now, it's not uninteresting, so don't get me wrong. There are elements I'm still very excited for. I'm just a little perplexed as to what exactly the point was of dragging us narratively through this dimension, and all of these fights if we're being forced to go right back to the beginning, having not come closer to achieving our goal. The only difference is that Ichigo and co are trapped in this area still looking for Orihime. Now, that's a good ending, I guess, and it builds sufficient tension for the final act of this three-part story, but the way they got to this point felt at times quite bloated. I can appreciate this little section in Wakamundo divulging a lot of necessary exposition and did elevate Ichigo's abilities, which I'm sure will come in handy with this upcoming section. But given how long it was, Plus, I feel like it could have been made significantly shorter.
I don't know, it's a shonen, you need the fights. Plus, I reckon he was probably told at times to make it longer. I really need to pee again.
I will say that I enjoy this world Kubo is building, and I am still very interested in the climax he's building too.
Yeah, oh, the invasion arc, let's go! Whoa, what happened there? No! I think my whole laptop's just frozen up. Oh god.
The first part a lot more, but I will say that Kubo's art style and artistic approach to making manga is so up my alley that even reading through less than interesting fight sequences didn't matter much to me, as I could breeze right on through them with ease. But I can also appreciate that I might have been singing a very different tune had I been reading this week to week, so there's that caveat. Next week will be the conclusion of this very long Arrancar arc.
Mate.
Interest is still intact,
And then it's the 1,000-year blood war, which is crazy.
in this section, so I hope I can come and see you
Awesome.
all there for the conclusion to this review series of the Arrancar arc next week. But until then, I've been Toy Not Mark. Thank you all so much for watching.
So, yeah, awesome. Really like that review. He had some really valid points made about Chad just sleeping. That's funny. And yeah, I look forward to seeing his final bit, see if he changes his opinion on certain things in this with how the next bit goes. Yeah, thank you to my patrons. If you want to have your name at the end of a video upload, links in the description to the Patreon page. $1 most nice helps with the channel. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much for that. Thank you all for watching. What do you guys think of that? What do you think of this? Click like, subscribe, and leave comments down below. Let me know if I should watch future videos. I'll see you guys next time. I'm ready to be now. Bye.